On to another ancient river valley civilization, and that one would be ancient India and the Indus River Valley civilization. And you see that they existed about 2600 BCE until around 1700 BCE. So let's get started. India is what we call a subcontinent. Now, a subcontinent is actually a piece of land, usually pretty large, that juts out from another continent, but it is somehow separated from that main continent geographically. It can also be considered a subcontinent if the culture of that area is defined as absurdly different than the rest of the continent. India is one of the few places, if not the only place on the planet, that fits both those categories. So, India is part of a much larger continent that we know as Asia, but it is separated geographically by two very large mountain ranges, which we're going to talk about, and it is also culturally separated from the rest of Asia because it is just so vastly different. India, more than any country that I can think of on the entire planet, is super diverse. You'll go from one neighborhood to the next, and in one neighborhood, you find people living in palaces eating out of golden bowls, made of real gold. And one block over, people eat dirt for dinner. I mean, it's just completely, totally diverse. And the religions there, which we will learn in this unit, are completely diverse as well, depending on what town you live in. So again, defining a subcontinent, here's a much easier way to do it. India is geographically independent from Asia and the rest of the world because of geography, and then add that culture thing in there too. Okay, so it's part of a larger continent, separated geographically, separated culturally. So here is a map. And the reason that I'm putting this up here is because I just told you how different India is. Look at the difference in the land masses, the geographical land masses. So you have places that are giant mountain ranges there in the far north and throughout the subcontinent. You have many, many rivers running through it. You have lots of places that are green, which means they're super, super lush, even to the point where it's too lush, they overflow and flood constantly. So not only are they different from the rest of the continent, they are geographically different from one another within their subcontinent because it matters where you live. If you have to learn to live in a desert or a mountain range or a valley that floods constantly, or maybe you're lucky enough to live in a place that's just lush and fertile and you can grow anything, your lives are going to be very different from one another. And so you can see from this geographical map how different those lives might be. Again, India is separated from the rest of the continent of Asia, by two very large mountain ranges that meet. And they are, of course, to the north of India, and so they act as this barricade that makes it very difficult to cross from Asia into India, especially in ancient time period. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a very large mountain range. It's about 500 miles long. In many places, it's as thick as 150 miles. So the Hindu Kush Mountains are very difficult to navigate even today. It's really hard for vehicles to get through the Hindu Kush Mountains, and especially if you're talking about trade and you have large trucks coming through. Most of the passes through here are one lane, and there are cliffs off on the edge, and there's rushing water during the flood season, and it's just a really, really tough terrain. So you have to know how exactly to get across this mountain range, and it's still going to be risky for you. But in the ancient time period, they found a path that actually worked. Not, and again, it's not super safe, but it actually served as a pretty good mountain pass. It's still there today. It's pronounced Khyber, so it's the Khyber Pass through the Hindu Kush Mountains. So that is the most used passage through that mountain range in ancient times, and it's still used today. But again, super steep, very long, cliffs on either side with rushing water, Very dangerous, whether you were walking through it back in ancient times or riding an animal, or today you're riding in a vehicle. So, super difficult to navigate through the Hindu Kush Mountains. The other mountain range is the Himalayas. So the Himalayas are in the north again of India. It meets Hindu Kush. The Hindu Kush mountains are on the western side of India. The Himalayas are on the eastern side of India at the in the north. So it is the world's tallest mountain, the Himalayas, and it stands at an average, like you can see, of 5 miles above sea level. So it is very difficult to navigate this one because it is so high, and many people not prepared to cross the Himalayas, even in modern times, will get something called altitude sickness. So now today we do have equipment. There's pills that you can take. You can take an oxygen tank with you to prevent you from getting altitude sickness today. But in ancient times, they had nothing. And altitude sickness can give you hallucinations, make you think you can fly, can make you throw up so hard that you're actually throwing up blood. It can do awful things to you. It can put you to sleep forever. So altitude sickness is a very real danger, especially in ancient times. But even today, I mean, if you're gonna climb the Himalayas, you better be going with somebody you know, because people die on the Himalayas even today. So you've got these two mountain ranges that block access to India, and so it keeps it that's what makes it called a subcontinent, because that those two mountain ranges meet, and they are completely separated from the rest of Asia because of them, and because they're both so difficult to get through. All right, so how might those mountain ranges and the Indian Ocean affect the Indus River Valley civilization in India? I just told you it's going to keep them isolated. The rest of the world is not going to find them for quite a while. You're not going to have a bunch of people taking over the Indus River Valley civilization easily. It's just not going to happen because it's too hard to get there. So we talked about the mountain ranges being difficult to navigate, but the Indian Ocean is as well. If you don't know what maritime path to take to get to India and what ports to land in, you're not going to arrive safely. Those waters are very rough. So again, it's going to keep the people of the Indus River Valley very isolated in India in ancient times. So the Indus River Valley, of course, is going to depend on a river. Duh. This one is different because it actually has two rivers. So it is named after the one that they not kind of, they actually use as their source of life, because this is the river that, just like the Nile in Egypt, will overflow and keep things nice and fertile, and keep the people's food supply. So that one, of course, is going to be the Indus River because we named it after it. And here is a picture of the Indus River. The Indus River is a little bit, it is not as predictable as the Nile, or even the Tigris and the Euphrates. So this river sometimes causes problems for people that live along the river because it floods it a little bit too much. When the Indus River does flood, it is massive, absolutely massive. It's not super unpredictable. They know when it's coming. It's the level that is more unpredictable than anything else. But the time, they know when it's going to happen, and so they try and prepare for it to keep the loss of life and buildings and crops at a minimum. So here's what the floodplain looks like. Look how beautiful it is. So very, very, very obvious where that floodplain ends. Look over to the right hand side of the screen. I mean, that's bad. There's nothing growing there. But look how lush and green and beautiful the floodplain is. So again, it is their lifeline. That Indus River is absolutely the lifeline of that ancient Indus River Valley civilization. Now, the second river important to the Indus River Valley civilization was a river called the Ganges River, and it is still very important to the people of India even in modern times. So, let's take a look at why the Ganges River is so important if it's the Indus River that was the lifeline. So the Ganges River, it does overflow and it creates good soil, yes, but it becomes something much different than that. When the religion of Hinduism, which we will talk about more in this unit, when it becomes a big thing in India, this river, and we're not sure where it started, but this river becomes denoted as a holy river. So people bathe in it. They come to die along the side of it. They come to die in it. There's a couple other things I'll show you in just a minute that they do. But the actions of the people in India, even though this is a holy river, they eventually damaged the river to the extent that it was considered one of the five most polluted rivers in the entire world in 2007. So it has gotten better, but it's still, no, I'm not bathing in that. Now, nasty. So let's find out exactly how it got that polluted if it's a holy river. So here you see people bathing in it. And again, you bathe any opportunity that you possibly can because it is holy and it's supposed to cleanse you. So if, anytime you go to the Ganges River, you're going to find people down there bathing. And you see that the political entities in charge made places for people to stand and sit and get into the water. And so it was a safe thing as well that you could go and you can worship there. So now this is in modern times. So it should tell you that it started in ancient times and the government somewhere along the way thought it was important enough to make stairs and places for people to sit and a way to get to the river that was easy access. So that should tell you how important this river still is even in modern times. All right, so it looks beautiful, right? Don't you want to get in a boat and sail down there? You know, maybe with a boyfriend or girlfriend, serenade each other. How romantic is that? No, I don't think so. Look at what's really in the Ganges River. You're going to see the other picture if it's a pamphlet of people trying to get you to come there, but here's the reality of it. The greatest gift that you can give to a family member who has passed away is to bury them in the river. And so many people still practice a tradition that goes all the way back to ancient times of putting an individual who is dead on a makeshift raft, and you put all their belongings that were super special to them on it. You say their last rites, you set the raft on fire, and you float them out into the Ganges River so that they actually are buried within the waters of the river. So, of course, bodies are not going to burn completely up because it's in water. So, whatever is left of that person is part of the thing that is polluting the river in ancient times as well as modern times. But it's their culture. I mean, they believe that that is like a sure way to make sure that, your afterlife is what it's supposed to be. And you're going to, which we'll talk about later, that you'll make it to that, the ultimate heaven of nirvana because you've been buried in this holy entity. So, people standing outside of this religion just do not understand it. But the reality is that it did pollute the Ganges River to an extreme level so that people that were coming down just to bathe were getting many diseases and in some cases still are today. So here's another picture of bodies floating in the river. And here we have one of those belongings. So I told you that they put the belongings of the dead on the raft. Well, that doesn't burn up either because you're on the water. So along the shorelines in little pockets where the tide, drifts things that are in the water, you have this buildup of all kinds of stuff. And so super polluted. And you see there's animals in the water as well that will get in, and little children get in and urinate, and it's just anything you can think of that would help pollute this river has been done to it in the name of Hinduism. All right, so let's talk about monsoons. Monsoons are a way of life in India. So we have two different versions of monsoons. One season, or I should say season, not versions. What am I thinking? The summer monsoons will come in to the continent from the southwest. So you see it's coming out of the water across India. So that should be real easy for you to figure out that that means that's a lot of rain happening in the summer monsoons. So super, super rainy because of where the winds come from. Really strong winds. I mean, some days it's like hurricane, level one hurricane winds, but that's just the way it is. That's the season. So torrential downpours and really high winds with the summer monsoons. Now, in the winter, their winter is actually very, very hot and very dry because the winds are coming out of the north and those mountains are blocking wind. So it's actually their winter is super hot and very little wind is actually blowing across the country of India. So make sure you can tell me which season is which. Summer is super wet, India super dry and hot. India winters super hot and dry. I will get this right, I promise. So summer wet, winter dry. So the monsoons, you see, you look at this picture and you think, oh my gosh, who wants to live like that? But it is part of their culture and they love their rivers. They know that when the rivers overflow and then recede, what's left will be land that can grow anything. And so their people will be fed and be able to make money. So they just learn to live with it. They absolutely learn to live with it. Now there are parts of India that have had unbelievably bad floods, and they have had to reach out across the world in modern times and ask for help to rebuild. So I'm sure in ancient India, it was much more devastating. At least they can have global help now. But I mean, it's their home. So even if you have, every 10 years it floods super bad, like in Bangladesh, are you gonna leave? It's your home. So I lived in North Carolina for many years, and whenever we had a really bad hurricane coming through, they would knock on people's doors and say, you have to leave. We're ordering you to leave. It's for your own life. And people would say, I'm not going. I'm not going. And there were cases where homes were completely destroyed, and the people that owned those homes went right back and built them up again and lived there again. So you have this sense of ownership, and no matter what, you're going to keep it. So the monsoons have impacted the Indus River Valley in a positive way by making them have great soil, but also in a negative way where it is a great hardship sometimes to these people, and they still don't want to leave. All right, so let's go all the way back to the ancient world and see where we think the Indus River Valley civilization began. It actually began with two cities. They're considered twins. Okay, so you see them on the map here. Harappa is more to the north and Mohenjo-Daro is more to the south. They are both along the Indus River. They are 400 miles apart, but they are identical. So that's kind of a mystery of the time period. 400 miles is a really long way, especially in a country like India where you have, issues with traveling with deserts and mountains and rapid rivers and things like that. But they are twin cities. So we're not really sure exactly how that happened. But Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, make sure you can place them on a map. Okay, so again, you can see that they did look very, very much alike. This is the remnants of it. They had very tall buildings, maybe as tall as 5 stories or even more. We're not positive. They had indoor plumbing. They had a sewer system that connected to the plumbing, so you didn't have to worry about like outhouses, which we still had here in America. My gosh, my grandmother had an outhouse her whole life. So these guys are way, way, way ahead of everybody else. But to have an indoor flushing toilet in this time period, absolutely amazing. So little is really known about them because we've never figured out their writing system. So when we went to Egypt, remember that the Rosetta Stone helped us to decipher hieroglyphics, and we found out all this new great stuff about the ancient Egyptians. We haven't gotten there yet with the people of the Indus River Valley culture. We have not been able to figure out their writing. We do, and again, these are guesses, we do think that they had very few social classes, so it might have been a place where you could find equality. We think they had a religion because there have been many, many little models of what looks to be a goddess found all over the digs that have been done there. We've also found goods in the digs that show us absolutely they traded with the people of Mesopotamia. So how in the world the people of Mesopotamia crossed those mountains, or maybe these guys were going to Mesopotamia, that's kind of a mystery too because it was a rough road. We do know also from remnants that they liked jewelry. They like to bury their dead with special things. So we know that they honored their dead and felt love. We've talked about that before when we talked about Catahoyuk. So we have basic knowledge of these people, but we don't really have specific knowledge of them. So here are some things that we found, and this is their writing. It's not Sumerian. It's definitely not Sumerian. They did use some wedges, but it is totally different than anything we've ever seen before. And so we just have not been able to figure out what any of it means. Now, here's the little goddess models that I told you about. So they all seem to be female, but they all look a little bit different. The bug eyes kind of creep me out just a little bit. But anyway, they have belly buttons, which is very unusual. So we're not really sure. Like, what is that headdress about on the one? Why are some standing and one sitting? Are they? Is it more than one god? And but they're all female. I mean, for all we know, maybe the females were running this whole place, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. That would absolutely makes sense, right? Because it's this great place with indoor plumbing and things that make your life easier. Put women in charge. That's what's going to happen. So who knows? We don't really know because we can't figure out their language, like I said. All right. So what happened to Indus River Valley civilization? We don't know. They just stopped existing in 1700 BCE or around there. But there are many, many theories as to what might have happened to these people. So let's look at the theories. One of the theories is that the Indus River Valley may have changed course for a while. Maybe it flooded them out. Maybe there were torrential downpours year after year after year. And finally, the people said, we love our home, but we have to leave. Who knows? But it could have something to do with the Indus River. It could be that massive flood, yes, or it could be an earthquake. Maybe it's both. So the Indus River Valley might have changed course, which caused that flood. And then on top of it, you could have had earthquakes. There are faults under this, under Harappa Mohenjo-daro. So they do have earthquakes there in modern times. Now, a massive one that's ever been documented, but that does not mean it never happened. The third one is that perhaps they overworked the land. We talked about that with the Hebrews, that they had to leave the promised land. They had to leave Canaan because they had overworked the land and ended up going to Egypt and being enslaved for 400 years. Maybe that's what happened to these people. They overworked the land and they just moved away. Or maybe what happened to the Hebrews did happen to them. They went someplace else and they were enslaved, and so they could never come back. Who knows? The most popular one for a really long time was that there was a group called that we call the Indo-Aryans. They are Aryans by blood. You may know this name from Hitler. Hitler thought Aryans were the perfect people and that he was trying to do experiments to make everybody in Germany look Aryan, which was blonde haired and blue eyed. Well, here's the difference. Hitler loved the light Aryans. These people that came into India are not blonde haired and blue eyed. They are the dark Aryans. So they would have had dark hair, dark eyes, but they are Aryans from somewhere in the European world. And then when they invaded India, they got the name the Indo-Aryans. So we used to think that perhaps these guys were the reason. Like maybe they moved into Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and just killed everybody. They had horses. They were considered pretty vicious. We know that they did take over many places in other parts of India, and they did it pretty nastily. But here's the problem. We have never found any kind of grave sites where it looks like the people buried there died in battle. I mean, it's just their bodies aren't messed up like they would be if they had all been murdered in this great battle. So it just does not make sense anymore. But like I said, for a really long time, we used to think that's probably what happened to these people. So we're right back to square one with four theories. Maybe we're still wrong. Maybe the Indo-Aryans did do it and carried their bodies someplace else or threw them all in the river for all we know, and they could have traveled, way far away. We don't know. But we don't have a favorite one anymore like we did with the Indo-Aryans, so it's all up in the air. All right, so here's the path that we think the Indo-Aryans probably took. They came through the Hindu Kush and invaded and took over Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, maybe, but we do know that they did take over some other places. So you see the Indus River, but these guys are actually going to come much more further south. So they may never have even met Harappa and Mohenjo-daro people. They may have passed right by them and ended up, going a little bit further south and taking places over there. So here is the crutch of the Indo-Aryans. Whether they did get rid of those two ancient twin cities that we know so little about or not, the fact is that they did change India forever and forever and forever. So they brought with them a collection of hymns and rituals and religious teachings. It's not a book. We call this collection, a very large collection, the Vedas. And again, it is not a single book. It's many things. It's hymns, rituals, and religious teachings on separate pieces of paper. One has nothing to do with the other. It's writings. So the Vedas are what the Indo-Aryans used as their holy works. Don't say book, holy works. And that's they're still accepted in India today, by the way. All right, so the Indo-Aryans again will change India forever by setting up a very, very rigid caste system. So the caste system is going to be intact in India till about 50 years ago when the government decided that they were going to get rid of this caste system. And of course, it's not going to be successful because it's so embedded in their culture. But Gandhi was one of the people that was definitely trying to get rid of this caste system. Indira Gandhi was also trying to get rid of it. It is just not a fair system. But again, it is so embedded in their culture in India that it does still exist. So here is their hierarchical pyramid of your place in life based on this caste system. So at the very, very top, you have the Brahmins, who are the holy figures. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to memorize the names, the Hindu names of the other uh, levels in between because it's like super, super hard. So know the English. Okay, so under the Brahmins, which are priests, you have the warriors and kings, and then the business community, servants, subordinates, that kind of thing. And then at the very, very bottom, you have a group called the Dalits. We call them the untouchables. Okay, so for this, you need to know Brahmin is at the top and the Dalit are at the bottom. So here's the thing. Each layer in this pyramid has certain jobs that they do, certain places that they live, certain habits that they must do based on their place in this pyramid. So you're never going to move up out of your little space on this pyramid during your lifetime. Never, ever, ever, ever will you move up. The only way for you to move up is for you to die. And when you die, if you have done all good works here on the planet as a living being, you will be reborn at a higher caste. That's what they believe. But here's the problem. And here's why so many people have issues with the caste system. Those deletes at the bottom, the untouchables, can never ever leave their caste. It doesn't matter how good they are, how wonderful they can never leave their caste. They are there forever. So the other layers of this pyramid work their whole lives to be super, super good, not only with the idea that they want to move up in a caste, but for that great fear that if I'm not a good person, I might come back as a delete, and I can never undo that. Okay, so notice that the pyramid, and this is how it would be presented in India. The bottom of the pyramid with the deletes on it are not even allowed to touch the pyramid of the rest of the people living in India. In a drawing, you can't allow them to touch the rest of people. So, like I said, each one of these layers has a job. The deletes job, or the untouchables job, is to do the lower work that most people are not willing to do. And many forms of their work involve some kind of bodily fluids. So even in modern times, if you are a delete or an untouchable, you might be a street sweeper because people spit in the street there quite often. And so you would be the one sweeping up the spit. You would be the one that would be the cleaner of the public toilets. And delete children actually often had that job where they would well, today too, not late, not just in the past. Today too, if you want to use a public bathroom, it is an outhouse most often, and believe it or not, and as gross as it is, most often those outhouses are on a dock, and when you go to the bathroom, it goes into the water. So these children, these delete children, will take your money from you, and they clean the bathrooms. So there's some weird rules about it, and I'm going to give you one that's going to blow your mind. You're not supposed to ever touch anybody that's not part of your delete group if you're a delete. Okay, you're not ever supposed to touch a Brahmin or a warrior or even a servant that is a subordinate to the warrior. You can only touch people within your delete group. So, but you're the one that's going to be the person in charge of bodily fluids. So it is untouchables, the deletes, that deliver babies. And for several days after the baby is delivered, the baby is considered unclean. And so it is a delete that must clean the baby for several days after it is born and rub it down with oils. So the baby is not delivered in the home. It might be delivered out in the yard. It can't be in the home because a delete cannot come into the home of a different social caste. Not allowed to, no matter what the reason is. So that baby will just be born out in the yard, and then you bring the baby out for several days to the yard. The delete will come and rub it with oil and clean it up until the baby is considered clean, and then the delete never comes back again. So there are I know this sounds horrible, but they do actually accept it. I mean, deletes often in India know their place, and to them, that is just the way their life is. They don't see themselves as downtrodden. There are groups that are speaking out, but there are many groups too that are just like, that's the way it is. And there's one thing that they are allowed to do that I think is keeping them with the idea that it's okay. And that is, remember, they deal with bodily fluids. It is the untouchables, the deletes, that deal with the dead. So when you are born, The first hands to touch you will be a delete, and when you die, the last hands to touch you will be a delete. So the deletes are the ones that prepare your body to go out on that raft into the Ganges River. They are also the ones that light it on fire. And so it is deletes in the untouchables that have a 24-hour fire that they keep going, so if somebody dies, that fire is there, and the raft can be lit. So they're responsible for seeing every person in India that practices this belief, seeing them off into the afterworld or the afterlife. So that's a pretty big privilege to welcome you to Earth and to watch you or be responsible for you leaving the Earth. So very, very, very big deal to be a delete. It's not all bad stuff to them. All right, so let's talk about the actual religions of India. And the two religions that are dominant there today are Hinduism and Buddhism. All right, so Hinduism is a very unique religion in that it is both polytheistic and monotheistic. Polytheistic means you believe in multiple gods, monotheistic means you believe in one. This is called monistic. How in the world does that work? Okay, so here's how it is. If you're a Hindu, you most likely believe that there is one single God by the name of Brahma. And Brahma, who is a male god, takes many, many forms. Sometimes Brahma is a cow. Sometimes Brahma is a woman. Sometimes Brahma looks like a baby. So it is still Brahma inside, Brahma that monitors everything, but the form that he takes a new name. So you've got the same spirit or entity inside all these figures, male, female, animal, vegetable, but they go by a different name. So it fits both. It is one God, but it is also many gods because he takes on many forms. And that is Hinduism. So Hindus believe that all living things have souls. Most of them are vegetarians. Cows are particularly sacred to Hindus, and I've read many different versions of where this came from. I'll just be honest with you, we don't know. But they don't eat beef. And if you go to India, they don't cage their cows or fence them in. They think that they have the right to roam free. And so if you're in traffic, it's not going to be just you and a bunch of other people in cars and bikes and motorcycles. It's going to be you sitting there with cows too. And if the cows are blocking the road, you're not going to get out and move that cow because that cow is holy. Cows are allowed to wander downtown. They'll get into your tent if you're a street vendor, and you're not allowed to be mean to them or chase them away. They're holy. So that's just the way it is if you're a Hindu. So this is a religion that we believe came with the Indo-Aryans. So there were probably other religions there as well. So it really truly became a hodgepodge of religions. So there is not really a religion known as Hinduism. Here is what happened. When the British invaded India, they did not know what to do with all the religions that were there. Some were completely different from one another, but they had certain things in common, like this idea of Brahma taking on multiple forms, the idea of being a vegetarian and cows are holy. And so they thought, well, it's close enough to being one religion. We're just going to call them all Hindus. We don't know what they are. So it is actually the British who created this idea of Hinduism, but it's really many, many religions all rolled up into one. One Hindu does not practice their religion the same way that another Hindu does. So it is many different ideas about religion. This is just a few things that I gave you that they have in common. So I'm going to show you a couple, at least one other god here in a minute. If you are a Hindu in one town, you might only believe in Brahma. But if you're a Hindu in another town, you might believe in Brahma, but you really are partial to this other form of Brahma called Shiva. So it just depends on where you are and your family and what your family has taught you and your community. So there is not really a united Hindu religion. That word did not even exist, Hinduism, until the British came in and stuck their nose in this country. So it I don't know what else to say about that. The British make me so upset. Okay, so let's move on. Hindus still consider today the Ganges River to be holy. We believe again that probably started with the Indo Aryans, but it could go even further back. We're not sure exactly when that started. It could go all the way back to before the Aryans came in. We guess that Harappa and Mohenjo-daro people probably made that pilgrimage to the river, but we have no proof. All right, so your job is to make a pilgrimage to the river whenever you can. If you practice Hinduism in India, bathe in it, die on the banks of it, be buried in it. Anything that you can do to have to do with this holy body of water. And this is a version, I forget which version of Brahma this is. I can't, his name just went out of my head. But most of the characters, if it's a human character and it's a a Hindu character, Brahma's character, it will have multiple arms, even if it's you know whatever version of Brahma it might be. It's going to have multiple arms, and that represents the multiple gods that Brahma turns into. So it's real easy to pick out an image or a statue of a Hindu holy figure because of the multiple limbs. Now, this one is a really super popular one in India. This is Shiva, Shiva, and no, she is not standing on a baby. She's actually dancing on a demon. She has massacred the demon and she is protecting people from it. So Shiva is Brahma. Brahma's inside. It's Shiva on the outside, and she is a great protector. So many people, especially those who have a really rough life in India, really favor her over any of the other forms that Brahma is supposed to take in this monistic religion. We've talked a lot about the things that these Hindu people do have in common with one another, and that's why the British decided to just name them all Hindus. But here's a couple other things that I want to add to it too. So they all believe in reincarnation. Reincarnation is very, very important. Remember, especially if you believe in the caste system, because there is a chance that you could move up into a better place, or you could move down into membership with the deletes or the untouchables. So reincarnation is super, super important. How is reincarnation in the Hindu world determined? They believe it is based on karma, or what you have done in your life. What do you deserve? So if you've done bad things, then your reincarnation is not going to be to a good place. If you've done good things, you will be reincarnated to a better place, except, of course, if you're an untouchable or a delete. So what is nirvana? Nirvana is the only thing I can really think to relate it to for most people would be heaven. So these people believe that every time you die, you are reincarnated until you finally live the perfect life, and you never have to be reincarnated again. According to them, reincarnation is painful, like it hurts your soul and confuses your mind because you have all these lives that are in your head crowding you. And so nirvana is that final place of peace or heaven, and you never have to be reborn again. You just stay there. So pretty nice thought. So nirvana, the only way to get there is to die. That's going to be different than another religion we'll talk about in just a minute. So over time, their texts have changed. So we started with the Vedas, with the Indo-Aryans, but a lot of people never learned to read. And it is a lot of reading if you go in and start searching through the Vedas. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. So, somewhere along the line, and we're not sure who did it or when they did it, but somewhere along the line, a newer version of the Vedas was produced called the Upanishads. And it is a much simpler version. There's pictures in the Upanishads. There's not in the Vedas. So if you don't know how to read, you still understand the holy message in the Upanishads. So it's the same ideas about religion, poetry, music, just thought, religious thought, but it is a much simpler explanation and smaller. So today, India is dominantly Hindu. We're going to talk about Buddhism in a minute. There are Buddhists living in India, but once the idea of Hinduism was formulated by the British and it actually, became a religion, then it became the number one religion in India. So if you live in India, more than likely you are Hindu, but you might be Buddhist too, maybe. So, where does Buddhism come from? Buddhism started about 2,500 years ago with a man by the name of Siddhartha Gautama. He was a prince in India, and Siddhartha was very, very, very protected by his mother and father. He was not allowed to leave the confines of the castle that he lived in. And I don't mean to make it sound like he was a prisoner. This boy wanted for nothing. Whatever he needed, he got it. He just wasn't allowed to go beyond the walls because his parents did not want him to know how evil the world was. They wanted him to grow up with peace and serenity and love and hope. And so he had no idea what was outside the walls. So he gets married at the age of 29, and his bride has been instructed not to really tell Siddhartha very much about the outside world. She has been out there, but she kind of plays dumb about it. And Siddhartha isn't really bothered by it until they end up having a child. So she gets pregnant, she gives birth to a son, and all of a sudden it dawns on Siddhartha that he's responsible for this young life, and he hasn't lived any life. He doesn't know anything about the world. How will he teach his son about a world he's never seen? So Siddhartha decides that he's going to leave the castle. Now he's not a prisoner there. So, it's not like they're going to try and stop him with guards shooting at him or anything. So he left. And on his journey through town, he saw horrible things. He saw a homeless man begging for food, and no one would give him food. They spit on him when they walked by. He saw a dead body laying on the side of the road, and no one would even cover the body up or help him to get the body to the proper authorities. He saw a man beat up another man. He didn't know any of this stuff happened in real life. He had no idea. And so he doesn't know what to do with this. He's just completely dumbfounded by the evils that the human spirit allows to happen here on the planet. So he sits down under a tree to contemplate. And supposedly he sat there for more than 20 days, not drinking and not eating, which we know is not possible. But this is the story. And all of a sudden, it dawned on him how to save humanity. And so he starts preaching, and he travels all over India and expresses this idea of Buddhism. And so he becomes known as Buddha, which means the enlightened one. He says that the idea came to him, he felt enlightened under this tree, and he knew how to solve things. And so everybody calls him Buddha. Now, he's not a god. And there are people that practice Buddhism that kind of make it sound like he might be a god, but he was very adamant that he is not a god. Buddhism, in fact, has no god. We only consider it a religion because the Buddhists consider it a religion. And so, out of respect for their beliefs, we maintain that it is one of the five major religions in the world, the largest major religion in the world. So, again, there is no God. So you have Hinduism, which is very unique in that it's monistic, and you have Buddhism, which is very unique in that there is no God, but they still consider it a religion. So Buddha starts it, Siddhartha Gautama, he starts it, and he thinks that he has a way to make everyone happy. Here's what he comes up with. He wants people to find balance in their life. And there's two ways that they can do it. You start with the Four Noble Truths, understanding that ordinary life brings us suffering. The origin of suffering is attachment. The cessation of suffering is attainable if we get rid of those attachments. What does all that mean? All that means is you should not want for material things. Material things should mean nothing to you. So if you can get rid of that desire to have these beautiful material things, then you can move on to his eightfold path. And his eightfold path is divided into meditation, wisdom, and morality. And basically, it tells you what's the right view of the world, what's the right intentions that you should always have, what's the right speech that you should use. And basically, it's all this loving, giving, open, not selfish way of life. And so if you understand the Four Noble Truths and you get rid of that materialistic thing, and then you start practicing the Eightfold Path, you will have a beautiful life. That is what Buddha believes. All right, so Buddhists look at themselves to find peace. Like you're going to create your own peace. And they are so into that idea that it's all in your own hands that they also believe that you can reach nirvana or heaven, the perfect place, just like Hindus do. Only if you're a Hindu, you have to die to get there. If you are a Buddhist, you can get there through meditation. You don't stay there, but you can reach that level of perfect existence, perfect, peaceful existence known as nirvana through meditation. And the only way for you to do that is to be a good person and have good karma. So they believe in karma and nirvana just like Hindus. They just use it differently. So nirvana, you don't have to die to get there if you're a Buddhist. And the karma is all about, well, if you're a good enough person, you can reach nirvana through meditation. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, here is the symbol for Buddhist. Looks very much like the wheel of a ship, right? Notice it has 8 spokes, one for each of the Eightfold Path. This is what what Buddha looks like. Okay, so if you see a figure like this, that is Buddha himself. That is not a God. Remember, there is no God. That is Buddha the man, Siddhartha Gautama, the guy who created it. Now, most people think this is Buddha. That is wrong. This guy's name is actually Buddha. Buddha is a symbol of love and laughter, happiness in life. And so you're supposed to actually rub the belly of a Buddha statue, and it's supposed to make you happy, make you feel good. So he is not Buddha. He is the happiness that Buddhism can bring you if you properly follow the rules of Buddhism with the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Okay, so Buddha is a very different character from Buddha, and I hate it when I go to the mall, especially at Christmas time. It seems like there's Buddhas everywhere around here, and they have this little set of little red figures, and at the bottom they have a big sign that says set of 3 Buddha figures, and it just irritates the crap out of me. So I argue with that man every year. He sees me coming. So, help me out here. You see it at the mall, take them down. Go tell him that is not Buddha. That is false advertising. Okay, I'm done lecturing on my soapbox here. All right, so India is backwards, yes, from other people on the planet. Again, because they are so isolated, people can't get there easily. So they don't develop their first real empire until 321 BC. And this very first empire was known as the Mauryan Empire. Here is the extent of it. Now, India is a massive, massive country. So the Mauryan Empire was huge. The guy who actually founded it and figured out a way to unite all these very diverse people was a man by the name of Chandragupta Maurya. So Chandragupta had 100 children. We do not know which genders any of them were. So there could be 50 boys and 50 girls. We don't know. We only know that he had 100 children. One of the children that he had was a man by the name of Asoka, and it is spelled both ways. So Asoka is coming of age when Chandragupta starts to show signs of illness, and it is believed that he may not be with them much longer. And so, of course, Chandragupta is going to have to decide which child is going to take over. And lo and behold, all the boy children start to die by mysterious means. Just get sick and die in their sleep, fall off of a cliff, mauled by a hippo. I mean, whatever. All the male children start to die. The only one that is left that is male is Ahsoka. Did he do something dastardly? We don't know. We don't know how many males there were. Maybe there were 95 females, female children of Chandragupta, and 5 boys. We don't know. We do know that all the boys died, but we don't know what all is. So maybe it was a coincidence and Ahsoka did not do anything wrong, or maybe he murdered all his brothers. We don't know. All right, so this is pretty much what Ahsoka is supposed to look like. Okay, so daddy dies. There are no male children except for Ahsoka, and so he is going to actually be in charge of the Mauryan Empire. He is officially appointed the new emperor in 274 BCE. He's young. His father was well loved, so he feels a little bit intimidated by this new position, even though he could maybe have killed people to get it. But he was really worried about how people saw him, so he sent spies into the empire all over India to just kind of like hang out with people and have a conversation with these people about Ahsoka, and to kind of get an idea of what people thought about him. And then they were supposed to come back to him and tell them everything that they had learned. So he told them, if you lie to me, I will know and I will have you killed. So you will come back to me and you will tell me the truth. And so all these spies are given a date. They come back to report to him, and it is unanimously the same thing. Dude, your people hate you. They think that you're a jerk. So he decides that he's going to have to do something to make his people love him. And so he thinks it's going to come about if he shows that he is a great warrior and he gets more and more land for his people. And so he starts this battle between him and another small kingdom right outside their border called Kalinga. And Kalinga wasn't a super powerful place. It would easily be taken over. And so Ahsoka thinks this is the perfect way to show what a mighty warrior he is, that he will go take over the people of Kalinga, take their land, and now his people will love him. So he takes soldiers with him. They ride into Kalinga. There is a great battle, and at the end of it, Ahsoka has kind of pushed himself up to the over this hill, so he can't really see the city of Kalinga from his vantage point. And he fights this one last guy, and when that man falls to the ground, there's no movement. Ahsoka's like, "Oh, it's over. It's over. So I'm going to climb to the top of this little hill and look down on my beautiful new kingdom. And, I'm the king of this place now. Kalinga is mine." So he goes to the top of the hill, looks down, and all he sees is red. Everything is covered in blood. He had never seen such a violent scene in his life. This wasn't a beautiful moment, him taking the city of Kalinga and making it his. It was a moment where he realized that he was an evil, awful, terrible man. And so he decided right there on the spot that he would never allow another person to be killed because of an order that he gave. And so he's going to completely change his view on life. And guess what he's going to become? He's going to become a Buddhist. Right there on that hill, he says, I have got to change my ways. I've got to stop wanting material things and I've got to start doing the right thing. And so, right there on that hill, he makes the decision to become a Buddhist. So here's some of his accomplishments as a Buddhist. His military was no longer used to kill people. His military was used to help people. So if you were a kingdom or even a little town somewhere in India and you needed help to build a bridge so your people could get to market, or you needed a way to dam the water so that your people had a water source, that's what he used his military for. So he would send them in to help people do large projects like that. He made it an out he outlawed the idea of hurting animals and opened up free clinics for animals all over the kingdom. The people that worked there were government workers. The poor and common citizens were given food and housing and well taken care of. They were given medical care. So, for the first time, instead of saying the poor and the common citizens, like, unless you're rich, I don't want to have anything to do with you, that's not how it is anymore. He really, really did change. He really did. Seeing the massacre at Kalinga changed him forever and forever and forever. The roads are also made much better, and he set guards up at common intervals along the road to safely escort people. So now, if you were a bad guy and you were robbing people on one of his roads, his military had permission to take you in and put you in jail. They're not going to kill you, though. So it's not like he wasn't protecting his people. He definitely was, but he was doing it in a way with kindness. The treatment of his subjects changed drastically. He opened colleges and ensured that anyone that wanted to go to regular school or college could go. He opened libraries. He made sure again that people had the food that they need. So everything is different. He allowed common citizens to be part of the government and help to make laws and ask their advice about things. Ask them, what is your life like? What do you need? How can I make it better? So everything about the Mauryan Empire is going to change for these people under his power. Religion is also allowed to be whatever you want it to be for Ahsoka. He definitely pursued the idea of having a united group of people under the idea of Buddhism. But if you didn't want to be Buddhist, he wasn't going to kill you for it. So he was very, very open to allowing you to kind of do your own thing. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope it does. So here's the thing about Ahsoka. He By the time that he became a Buddhist, he realized that Buddhism was kind of being drowned out by the idea by this group of they're not called Hindus yet, but these other religions that will eventually merge and become Hinduism. He realized that it was choking Buddhism. And so Buddhism was very much in danger of dying in India. And so one of the greatest gifts that he gave to the Asian world, you can ask anybody in Asia, they'll tell you the same thing, was he paid missionaries to take the idea of Buddhism and spread it throughout the Asian world. And so today, if you look on a map and a religion map, most Asian countries are predominantly, actually, I think all of them are, I can't think of any that aren't, that are predominantly Buddhist. And that would not have happened if Ahsoka had not paid these missionaries to go spread the word. So he definitely changed religion in massive quantities in that part of the world. All right, so if you see a map like this, that's what they're talking about. So see, it goes out of India, goes all the way down through China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, all these places, Asian places that you can think of, are all going to be Buddhist because of Ahsoka. Okay, and that's the Mauryan Empire. Now, many, many, many years later, we will have a second empire. The first empire, the Mauryan Empire, as wonderful as Ahsoka was, it did not fare well after he passed. He was pretty old when he passed, but it was like they just did not have any good leaders after him, and things really fell apart. So it's going to be a long time before they can bring themselves back together to create a united empire. Notice it is smaller than the other one, than the Mauryan Empire, but at least it's coming back together. So the Gupta Empire is going to exist about the same time as the Roman Empire. And the way that this was done is every town in the Gupta Empire had a small standing military and an elephant. So whenever the emperor called on people to come, we need protection, come, they had a standing military in every single town and they had an elephant. So that's kind of the way that they found unification in that idea of a standing military. Now, the Gupta Empire is considered the empire that went through the golden age of the ancient Indian culture. And that basically means this era was super progressive. Good things were happening. People were finding better lives, better ways of doing things. So, like, everything just seemed to be really great during the Gupta Empire. So, the golden age is the Gupta during the Gupta Empire. So here's some things we're going to look at why it's the golden age. The treatment of people, and a lot of it goes back to those ideas of Ahsoka and the Mauryan Empire. The treatment of people was very humane. Criminals were not put to death, but they were sufficiently punished. So people were happy with that. You didn't get away with anything. There were schools for everybody, just like under the idea of Ahsoka. Universities in this time period became the best universities on the planet. And to be honest with you, today the universities of India are still some of the greatest ones on the planet. Excuse me. And they're very willing to be experimental in the medical world to make people better, unlike a lot of modern day countries. But back then, they wanted people to feel better. So again, you have the free clinics. Public works were not a servant of the government anymore. If you were doing a public work like building a school or irrigating a river or whatever, it used to be that you just were like ordered to do that, and that was your job, but you didn't get paid. Well, now you get paid. But not only is it for massive public works projects, the government is also, they want to beautify their empire. And so for the first time ever, people like artists and poets, writers of any kind, they're all going to get paid by the government. So everybody's making money. Everybody has an opportunity to get educated. Everyone is treated fair. Now, women are treated much better in India than they are any place else in the world at this time period. Remember, this is we're still early on, so women were not going to be like the leaders. They weren't going to be the political entities, but they had some say in their own lives. They could own businesses, they could get an education, and they could pick who they married. Now, in this time period, a lot of marriages were uh, done through the parents, like the parents pick them. And in some civilizations, a man might find a woman attractive and go work a deal with this girl's parents to kind of make her marry him. Not like that during the Gupta Empire. During the Gupta Empire, women practiced something called swayamvara. And basically, this was eligible young bachelors that were interested in a particular woman were given a date and time to show up at her house. And when you got there, you wooed her and you did tricks for her and you danced and you sang and you basically did whatever she asked you to do. And at the end of the evening, she picked the guy she thought was best, and that's the guy she married. So lots of new freedoms in the Gupta Empire for the young ladies. Now, the Gupta Empire also had some pretty smart people there because of the colleges. They were very good in the science field. So, in the medical world, the people of the Gupta Empire were the first ones to figure out how to set bones. So, they realized that you could put the bone back together, make it stay still for a given amount of time, and it would mend. Prior to that, if you broke a bone, it just stayed like it was. And of course, people got infections and they died from it. So, big change in the medical world that if you break something, you can actually fix it. They also are credited with being the first ones to ever do cataract surgery on your eyes. So, I'm not sure if I want to go back in time and have a ancient Gupta guy take my cut my eyes, but supposedly they were pretty successful. So these guys are very innovative in the medical world. The earth, they also were the ones supposedly that figured out that the earth was round. So that old idea that, when Columbus or the pilgrims or whoever took off for the new world, everybody thought they were going to fall off the earth. That's not true. The earth, we've known since the Gupta people that the earth was round. We've known it for a really long time. So silly, silly people. They're also the ones that figured out that the solar year had 365 days in it. And they gave us a number system that we use today, the 9 digits and the zero, and they added the decimal. So they're the reason that we have that math system. And lastly, they gave us a lot of games that you have probably played in your lifetime. They invented chess. They also invented polo, and they invented the idea of playing cards. So, playing cards at one time, the kings used to actually be four real, honest to goodness living kings. And so, the idea of cards started with these guys. And once you started naming those kings after honest to goodness famous people, leaders in Europe, it caught on like fire in Europe. So, by the time that the colonies were settled here in America, that was the number one pastime in common households in the evenings. Everybody played cards. Everybody played cards. So all of that started with the Gupta Empire. India has given us many things. If we hadn't ever discovered India and made friends with them and traded with them, we would still only have salt and dandelions as our spice. That's all we had before we met these people. And so they gave us these amazing spices. They also introduced the idea of color, like color in clothing, color in art, just color, period, and some very exotic dances, which I will put up a link for one for you to go see. It's really cool looking. But let's look at this dress. That's a wedding dress in India. I mean, that how beautiful is that? So here in the colonies, for a really long time, I'm gonna say even until the 60s, really, we dressed boring. We, browns and blacks and grays, but look at this. This is absolutely beautiful. So India has given us many things that we should be appreciative for, but I think color and spices has to be at the top of the list. All right, that is it for the Indus River Valley civilization. Next, we will be talking about China. So, hope you enjoyed it. A very different place on the planet, on my bucket list to visit. Maybe one day we'll all go together. See you soon.